Welcome to the Self-Healing Revolution, where ancient wisdom and modern science meet. I am your host, Paige Pearman, owner of Love Yourself, located in Louisville, Kentucky, where I teach the wisdom of Ayurveda, integrative health. And it is my hope that during this summit, you will have access to many different guest speakers who will invite you in to learn how to biohack your body, master your mind, and elevate your soul. My goal for this summit is that when people start a self-healing process, that it takes many different modalities to self-heal the body. And so through my own healing journey, which took over a decade, I worked with professionals in many different areas to heal my own life. So it is my honor today to welcome you to Julie Barlow. She's the founder of JMB Living and creator of the beloved JMB Living Journal. She is also the co-founder of Travel to Transform International and an adjunct instructor teaching journaling classes at the University of Cincinnati. As a former yoga instructor and personal coach, she believes deeply in the power of mindfulness and its ability to transform lives. Empowered by the Mr. Rogers quote, "Often when you think you're at the end of something, you're at the beginning of something else." Julie resigned from her corporate job and a tax director shortly before the pandemic and without knowing exactly what was next. She just knew she wanted to help people in a bigger way. Shortly thereafter, a spark was ignited to create a journal that would inspire people to desire to use it every day and to gently guide them on a journey to more mindful living in the process. Published seasonally, the JMB Living Journal is an invitation to have a daily gratitude practice, habit tracker, and abundance mindset, and to choose seasonal activities. It is filled with beautiful quotes, short stories, and reminders to live your life fully and authentically. I myself have the journal, and I can tell you that it is a beautiful publication and one that has enriched my life. So Julie, thank you so much for joining me on the Self-Healing Revolution Summit.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. So I wanted to start off, people are probably familiar with journaling, and there's different kinds of journaling. But what is the concept of intentional journaling, and what separates the JMB Living Journal from other types of journaling? What makes it unique?
Sure. So people journal for all different reasons. Some want to just preserve their memories. Other people want to use it as a place to release, whatever is going on in their mind at the end of the day, somewhat of a brain dump, that type of thing. A lot of people use it for introspection, to learn about themselves more deeply, often through the use of journal prompts to just try and better understand yourself. And while we can use all those type of things in intentional journaling, the thought that I believe with respect to intentional journaling is that you're using it with the intention of creating what you want in your life or your ideal life. And so we do this by focusing on things like positivity, increasing your positivity in your life, better understanding yourself, and looking into like the patterns of what's working for you in your life, what's not working, and then taking this knowledge and helping you to really fine-tune your life, if you will, fine-tune your patterns and be able to direct your life with the intention of getting it more to what your ideal life is. There's other things that we use with that as well, such as visualization, really taking a look at managing your belief system. And like I said, the daily positivity practices, the gratitude, if you will, and other practices of positivity with it. So really helping to intentionally create the life you want.
Yeah, I love that about the intentional, like creating the life that you want. I mean, there's a difference between the day in and day out. I like to think of it as like mechanical living or robotic living, where we're just going through the motions, which I think a lot of humanity is just going through the motions. It's almost more of a survival mechanism to just get through our days. And yet we have these moments in the day that are free, even though we like to think we're really busy, and we are. There's these freer moments in the day. And I like what you said about creating gratitude, because it's my understanding, the more I study mindfulness, that gratitude is one of the biggest things that can spearhead you into the life that you desire.
I totally agree with that. And the great thing about gratitude is it's a tool that's free to us. It's always
Mhm.
there. And I think when you practice it regularly, I do think it's important to practice it regularly, because then what's going to happen is when you really need it and when times are tough and challenging, you're already well versed at how to do it. It's already a practice that's ingrained in you, and it's really easy to access at that point.
Yeah, like because it's the practice is there, then the
Right.
energy is already with you.
Right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. With gratitude, my partner was saying, we were driving into work this morning, and he said, the longer that I'm here on this earth, the more that I realize just being present in the gifts that are literally in that present moment. And sometimes it's hard to see what those gifts are if we stay fully present, but it draws us back into the beauty of living, that
Right.
I can't tell you the number of times that people said sometimes their biggest struggles were their biggest teaching lessons. So
Mhm.
sometimes we don't always realize the magic and in the hardship, but there's always some golden, if we look for it, it's there.
Right. Right. And if we practice looking for that on a regular basis, it gets easier and easier.
Yeah. Yeah. It becomes like a muscle that has been
Yes.
practiced, like we think about mindfulness. It's what I tell my people and my Ayurvedic teachings is that there's this concept of willpower, that we can willpower ourselves into a life that we want, or willpower ourselves to new practices, but that fatigues just like a muscle fatigues. So it's when we create a habit around something that it's easier to come back to it, because it's a habit. It's not because we're forcing ourselves into something, but it's truly become a habit.
Exactly. Yeah.
So is there a difference between actually journaling, right? Like I think people think, okay, well, maybe I walk through the process of my day when I'm in the shower, I'm driving to work, and I'm capturing what needs to happen or my to-do list. But what is the difference when you actually write something down versus you're just thinking about it in your head?
Sure. There's been a lot of research actually done on the difference in particular of handwriting versus even typing something into the computer. And what they found is that when you actually write things down by hand, it is sending sensory information to the brain at that point in time that helps the brain better be able to recall the information. So it helps with your memory. They've also found that it helps with comprehension and with critical thinking skills as well. So when you put all of those things together, it can really help with making the changes that you want in your life, particularly from like the memory purpose, and even in critical thinking, when you're trying to think about how do I want to change something in my life to help me work on this challenge and work through this challenge that I'm experiencing right now.
Yeah, and I found that to be true with your journal. There's the questions that are prompted, and sometimes there's like an immediate understanding what might the answer be, but sometimes I really have to sit with a question,
Mm,
and there's that critical thinking component of, you know, there's like an autonomic response, but sometimes there's something much deeper that you kind of have to tease out. And that's where I see the critical thinking come in. But I
mhm,
also love what you said. There's a kinesthetic component where we're using, in Ayurveda, it's the five senses. So touch is, kinesthetic.
mhm,
And and so touch is related to the air and movement in the body. And so where something could say be, at least from an Ayurvedic perspective, something could be stagnant or it could be dormant. There's this element of movement then gets like the prana or the chi or the life force, like
mhm.
moving from an Ayurvedic perspective when we use touch. And the more that I understand the body, I was talking, I mentioned this on another summit speaker, but I was talking to an occupational therapist, and she said one of the things that happened with children during COVID, when they were on the computers and they weren't doing their lessons the same way, that because they weren't using the kinesthetic body as much, one of the things, exactly what you said, is critical thinking skills went down. And
Interesting.
so, yeah, it was really, I was like, wow, that really stuck with me. Like sometimes
Mhm,
we rely so much on technology, and yet like just bringing in our senses and bringing in,
mhm.
like you said, like actually writing it down is activating a critical thinking part of the brain. And the more that we understand, like we think the mind and the body are separate, but they're not, like
Right.
they're just not, like we used to think that way. And I think now
Right.
there's a great consciousness around, around the fact that our body and our mind are very much integrated. Yeah. So do you have any other examples of where scientifically proven evidence of journaling is beneficial to have a regular journaling practice? Are there other scientific studies that you could share, especially since this summit is about, bringing in wisdom with science,
Sure. There's actually been a lot of research done on journaling, particularly in recent years. And what they found, one of the I think a lot of people already are aware of this, but it definitely helps with managing anxiety and stress. This is why so many therapists actually do suggest that to their clients that journaling is a really good idea. It, kind of back like to what we were talking about a minute ago, it can help you with those critical thinking skills. It can help you better prioritize problems that you have in your life.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and you start to understand yourself better. You get to know your own personal triggers. And then with this, you're better able to emotionally respond in a way that works well for you. So your emotional regulation improves. And all of this, particularly like with the stress and anxiety management and that type of thing, this is going to help, again, connection with the body to improve your immune system function, sleep better, and in general, if you're doing journaling in a way that is positive, so if you're doing it right, it can very much help with your mood improvement on a regular basis and your general outlook on life. And so all of that combined is going to lead to a more happier, successful lifestyle, if you will.
Yeah, I like what you said. There's the part of visualization about journaling that one of the studies that I remember that was really profound for my healing is that if you can visualize before you go to bed at night, then if you were to visualize the next day, for example, the things you wanted to get done, or like you said, intentional living, not just going through that mechanical day of just like, I've got to do this, I got to do this. But if you really get intentional about how you want that day to look or feel, and experience that visually, but also somatically, then you're more likely to actually implement that the next day than if you didn't visualize it the night before. So one of the things that I've actually done with your journal is I've done like part of it in the morning, but then I like to actually take that same journal and like revisit it that night, and then also visualize the next day ahead and then journal and then visualize. So it's like, I know that's 2 times a day, but it started to help me see, using your journal, how I actually was able to more successfully implement how I wanted to feel or be or show up, but then revisit that at night with the same intention of like showing up the next day. And then the next day, like seeing if my goals or my ideas about how that day I wanted them to align still were true. And I found that by doing it at night, I was more likely in the morning to step right into the way that I wanted to feel because I did it the night before. So I love what you're saying about the mood, the immune system, the ability to like live intentionally, like that word intentionally. It's so much better to live intentionally versus to be reactive versus proactive, I guess,
Yeah. And I actually do the same thing. I use it in the morning and the evening for the exact same reasons that you're talking about. And then interestingly enough, too, we talk about how much better that helps us function in our life, how much that helps us, with succeeding in our goals and that type of thing. There was a study done by Thomas Corley, and he wrote a book on the habits of highly successful people or self-made millionaires. And he had studied like 233 really highly successful individuals. And he found that 61% of these individuals journal. And wow. I found that really fascinating. He also found another characteristic of these individuals that he studied is that they were overwhelmingly positive. So taking the time to actually do things that increase the positivity in their life was helpful for them as well.
Yeah, I've seen similar research to exactly what you're saying. And it goes back to that gratitude piece. Some of the most successful people, especially when it comes to abundance and making money, like yes. They actually, because you think of people maybe that are very successful making a lot of money might be selfish, but in fact, they actually hold some of the strongest like gratitude practices that there are.
Mhm.
And so they're not taking it for granted. They're not taking for granted the life that they're living. And so that energy just sort of fuels itself
Right.
into success. So like if you weren't interested in health or you weren't interested in others, maybe like the desire to journal would just be around like, I want to be more successful or more abundant or more, you
Mhm.
know, pick what you want, like whether it be, like you said, the immune system or mood enhancement. Maybe it's just, I want to be more successful. That would be a reason to journal. And I love also what you said, you know, obviously to purchase a journal is one thing, but like it really is a pretty free thing that to be able to get the results that you're talking about, there's very little cost involved. Like if you were to go to a therapist at say $100 a visit, like to get that result that you're looking for, it's really not an expensive thing to do. And most of the things that help us heal our life really one of the things I've really tried to demonstrate during this summit is that healing doesn't have to be an expensive process.
Right. Yeah. That's so true. And I think that's one of the reasons why, I mean, the concepts of mindfulness, I practiced yoga for years, and I've had so much interest since a very young age, honestly, on consciousness and how I can better function, if you will, by being intentional with my own personal consciousness. But when I decided to create the journal, that really was what I was trying to do, is take a routine that someone can easily have on a daily basis, only takes a few moments a day, you know, even just like 5 minutes a day can make a profound impact in your life. And so really taking that practice of something that's easy to do and then infusing in it these little tools and tidbits of mindfulness and positivity prompts and that type of thing. And in that way, hopefully, people will be able to create real change in their life because they're doing it in a way that's lasting over time. It's not like you're going to, you know, like reading a book, you're absorbing it all. This is just like daily tidbits over time. And I think it helps better integrate into your mind in terms of, you know, some of these wellness concepts that we kind of just gently infuse throughout the journal, if you will. Because I have people that are very well versed in mindfulness and some of the tools of like affirmations and visualization and that type of thing using the journal. But then there's a lot of people that are very brand new to this. So just having just the little bits of information every day, I think, is a helpful way to truly incorporate more wellness in your life in general, if you will.
Yeah, I like how you said that it's peppered throughout the journal. So like there's
Mhm.
mindfulness challenges, affirmations, vision boards, and segments of inspiration. And so when you created the journal, was that your goal? Like, was it so that these things were, I want to say, like weaved in and out or weaved through it? And is that what makes your journal unique or different?
I think it definitely is. And I think when I went to create it, I really wanted a way to share what really has worked in my life, all the tools that have worked so well for me. And but I wanted to do it in a way that I could reach a whole lot of people. And so
Mhm.
to me, that was one way of being able to reach a lot of people. But then also I wanted it to kind of be like an experience. It was like as soon as you pick up the journal, you feel calm. It's an experience that you want to come back to day in and day out again and again. And in doing that and creating that routine and something that brings you joy,
Mhm.
then it'll keep you motivated to continue to do it. And that's where I think we begin to see the real change in lives, because it's not something that we can just do. You know, whether they say it takes at least 30 days to create a habit, right? So if we continue these processes of positivity and mindfulness for a longer period in time, it's only going to get stronger and stronger the longer you do it. So anything I think we can do to help integrate them more easily and gently into our lives, I think can be really helpful. And that kind of was the rationale between why putting it in a journal, if you will.
Yeah. And then one of the things that I love so much about your journal, like we're only talking about these affirmations and vision boards and, and even quotes are in there that are inspirational. And one of the things that I love about your journal is it's not just that, but it's beautiful. So it's something to be savored, like talk about that present moment of gratitude. It's visually very appealing to the eye, but the images are just, it's almost like you could use it as a coffee table book
Yeah.
because, you could just flip through it and just enjoy the journal itself because of, like I said, even you feature women in there and inspirational people who are doing amazing things with their lives that you get to be inspired by others as well. And
Right. Yeah, that was the other thing that's been really fun with it, because I knew that we all have so much that we can learn from each other. So I knew I didn't want just what I had, to share, to be in there, but to find a way to share, all the wisdom from all the other amazing women, it's been a lot of fun to be able to do that.
yeah, I get it. That's what I'm trying to do with the summit is like, we are so much wisdom amongst all of us as a collective to think that, like I always think in community there, everybody has their magic. Everybody has their essence that gives something beautiful to share to humanity. And I think your journal does such an amazing job of featuring these strengths that women who are embodying these practices are living this truth. You're sharing that with other women, and I think this can benefit men as well. Are
Mhm.
men using this journal?
There are a few that do it, but it is definitely predominantly women that do, because of probably the aesthetic feel that's created, and it definitely is geared more towards women. Though I have had men purchase it and use it. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean the tools within it can be used by anyone, but I do think it's the aesthetics that make it a little bit more apt to be used by women, and plus it's featuring women within it.
Yeah. I have a question. So there's a lot of journals that, you could go to the store and buy that are just like a journal for the whole year. Can you speak to why this journal is seasonal and why you put it out quarterly?
Yes, yes. So that was the other thing that I have become over the years to appreciate more and more, how important it is and how healing it can be to live in harmony with the seasons themselves. And I think in this day and age, kind of what you were talking about before, it gets so easy to just kind of be robotic with our lives that, seasons come and seasons go and everything's just the same. And it not only is it good for the body to live in harmony with the seasons, but it's such a joy as well to be able to experience what each season has to offer. So within the journal, it being, I like to call it seasonal somewhat, even though it is quarterly, but I like to call it seasonal because each one of them has a seasonal impact and then suggests certain things that you could do, during that season to more help you appreciate and notice what's going on in nature all around you as well, and to live in
Yeah.
harmony with that.
Yeah. It's so true to Ayurveda. It's really complementary to my practice. And I teach people to live by the circadian rhythm and by the seasonal rhythms of nature because the energetic shifts of the seasons are quite different, and they each offer, in terms of Ayurveda, the five great elements, they shift and they change, and when things are shifting in nature, they're shifting in our bodies as well. And I think people underestimate, like you said, the power of how those energies are changing and shifting within us. But
Mhm.
if you sit with those seasonal shifts and you sit with these journals, you can embody more alignment to nature. And really that brings health as well, because when we're out of attunement with nature, we're disconnected from our bodies because we're part of the greater whole.
Sure.
So I love that your journal does that because, yeah, like you said, seasons come and seasons go. And from an Ayurvedic perspective, when we miss the cues coming from nature, we miss these cues that are happening in our environment, we become more diseased because we're out of attunement. We're not in harmony. And there's something to be said about bringing ourselves in harmony with nature's rhythms and the seasons themselves.
And I think, honestly, for me, it also just becomes a very enjoyable practice. It gives you things to look forward to and appreciate in each season that otherwise you just might miss, you know?
Mm.
And it
Mhm.
also, I think, you start to look more for the beauty in nature as well as you start to, pay attention to those seasonal shifts. And when you pay attention to that beauty, I mean, beauty makes us happy. So recognizing and training yourself to look for the beauty all around you is another way too of just making yourself happier and feeling better, finding more joy in your days.
Mhm. What you say about beauty reminds me, of pleasure. Like beauty gives us pleasure to look at something beautiful, say it be flowers or to look at a loved one or to look at a beautiful table set, with a great meal. Like we just had Thanksgiving. Like, one of the things that makes that such a beautiful experience of this is we're coming together, but we create a sacred moment of putting food on the table and decorating it and making our home feel more welcoming and nurturing. And so it's like that. It's like you come to this place of recognition or understanding of where you are in time and space and honoring it.
Mm. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So can you talk about more about how affirmations can shift your mood and change your reality? Like,
Yeah, sure. I love affirmations. I've been using them for a long, long time. And I think, when I think about, well, what is an affirmation in and of itself, I think it's nothing more than a belief that we intentionally choose to embody and take on. And, I do believe that your beliefs essentially are kind of like the lens that you view your life through. And so you can have two different people with different sets of beliefs go through the same physical experience, but they can experience it totally differently. Their perspective can be totally different. One can view it from a very positive, it was wonderful perspective, and someone else, it can be, exactly the opposite. And it's all because of their difference in beliefs. So this lens that we filter our life through is extremely important to manage, if you will. And I think when we think about our beliefs, we don't typically take the time to think about, well, where did our beliefs come from? So we generally aren't born with a package of beliefs, if you will. There's something that we've decided to take on, whether it's we've learned them from parents or from teachers, from friends, a lot of them, as in our more formative years growing up, but then also just experiences in life too. And all these things combined together form this set of beliefs that you have. But if you don't take the time to think about, okay, are these beliefs working for me? Or are they causing me to not function, and not let my life play out in a way that I would like? And so when you take the time to be more intentional with your beliefs, I think it can really open up a whole new set of possibilities in your life. So I also think about affirmations in like there's a couple of different ways you can use them. One are the type of affirmations, and I think this is what most people honestly use them for, and you can find them all over the internet and everything. It's ones that just will change your mood and your level of positivity. And so it's just things where more like self-empowering type affirmations of things that are positive to how you feel. And those usually are things that you can instantly say it and feel more uplifted and better. But you can also take affirmations and intentionally use them to create more longer term things in your life as well. So really literally shifting your future. And, those take a lot longer to actually work. So you have to repeat them over time, because it's something that you're going to be wanting to let your mind focus differently by saying your affirmations. What's going to happen is you're going to be reminding yourself daily of what it is that you're trying to create in your life. And as a result, your brain's then going to be more open to the opportunities and see the things that you might not have otherwise seen as an opportunity. So I like to tell people often about like depending on what you pay attention to in your life, that's what you're going to see. So like for me, I love flowers. So anywhere I go, I'm going to be seeing, the flowers that someone has on their porch, or flowers when you're walking down, a street in a city or something like that. And I'll be paying attention to those, where my husband will just walk right by them and never notice them, because he'll be looking at some power plant over here, because that's what he's paying attention to. So whatever you're paying attention to, that information is then drawn into your brain. And so with respect to affirmations, just paying attention to these things is going to open you up to a whole new world of possibilities of being able to bring what you want into your life.
Yeah. I love what you said. There's a filter, I just did an Ayurvedic retreat. It was about Ayurveda and the mind. And one of the concepts that we explored in that retreat was there's the outer world, and then we have our inner world, our inner experience versus what's happening in the outer world. And kind of like what you said, you could have a car accident and you could have 10 or 15 people see that car accident, and each of them would tell, when like people get, they ask people like what happened, when insurance companies and the cops come to try to get a record of like what actually happened. The person that may have hit the other person, or the person receiving the hit, would have a completely different filter of what that experience was like, and remember it completely differently, because it's all going through their filter. And so this outer world and our inner world, if we change our inner world, or our inner impressions, or our inner beliefs, then we'll see that our filter, that it's that filter of what's happening in the external world to our internal world. It's almost as if we're shifting that filter of how we're willing to bring information. And just like you, it may be flowers. Like I have a thing for numerology, and I see 1111 like every single day. And until I started to recognize that, I may have been seeing 1111 my whole life. I just wasn't attuned to seeing those numbers. And then I started seeing, oh, it's 1111. Oh, it's, like 1111. I just started automatically seeing it. But I think it's because my filter shift. I was able to recognize that those numbers were important to me, from a numerology perspective. And so I like what you said about there's intentions that could be for a day, but there's also intentions that can change things for the long term. And what that makes me think of is in Ayurveda and yoga philosophy, we have something called samskaras. And samskaras are like these deep-rooted beliefs that we have. And usually those deep-rooted beliefs come, like you said, from childhood or from early impressions. And if you go back to the science, like they say by the age of 7 or 8, most of our mental impressions are pretty much like built into who we are. And then we may spend the rest of our lives like trying to undo whatever impressions, or if we're in the world of self-growth or self-inquiry or spirituality, then we may spend the rest of our lives, I call it like deconstructing what we believed and then building the life that we want. But there's something to be said, like you said, if we just do something like one-off versus a longer term journaling practice, I think it's what you're getting at is that it's that power of that habit of doing it regularly that you can change long term.
Yeah. And then the other thing too is there's been a lot more research done over, more recent years on the brain too. It's really quite fascinating. The brain actually continues to change throughout your whole entire life, which I find really fascinating, because originally I thought, you grow up and by the time your physical body is grown, that's way that you are physically, right? Unless you're like working muscles or that type of thing. But there's this concept of neuroplasticity where the brain actually does physically change your whole entire life. And it does that by the thoughts that you think repetitively. And so if you think about it, generally, as humans, we are more predisposed to things that are more negative because we're looking out for ourselves. Nature had created our brains in a way to help keep us safe, to watch out for the predators or whatever. So we need to then have a little extra effort to kind of shift things more back to the positivity front. And some of the research that's been done, I think is, like I said, totally fascinating. There is, I'm reading a book right now about the placebo effect. And in there, it talks about one researcher, John Levine. He was working with some pain research and the placebo effect on pain research. And what he found was that just the thought that you are going to get this pain relief medicine causes your brain to actually produce endorphins, or its own physical, like the brain's method of natural pain medicine, as you will, and get that physical relief. So even the people that were getting the placebo, because they thought they were going to get this pain relief, the brain creates the pain relief by this chemical reaction. So again, we have a thought that takes place and then a chemical reaction in the brain that happens from that very thought. So that's kind of interesting, and I think relates to affirmations, as well as some research that a Canadian neuropsychologist, Donald Hebb, he's coined a phrase called neurons that
fire together, wire together.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Thank you. Yes. And what happens then is, if we continue to think the same thought over time, when we think a thought, we have feelings and emotions, and the brain fires off all these neurons. And when you think that same thought repetitively, the brain actually learns, and then you have this network of neurons that are all firing at the same time. So all this coming back to that process of neuroplasticity and the changing of the brain. Well, when we do our affirmations, or when we say our affirmations on a daily basis, we're physically then actually altering our brain more towards positivity, because we are truly strengthening those new neural pathways with the thoughts that we think on a regular basis, which I find, really cool.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, for science to now be validating, I think the beauty of validating neuroplasticity is, not even 15 years ago, we were just told that or that the brain was just kind of like this programmed computer and it was stuck. And now it's like, what I love about neuroplasticity and what you're speaking to is it allows us to get out of a victim consciousness, that this is like where we have no power. And it then empowers us to take a stance and say, okay, I'm not in this victim consciousness, that especially when it comes to pain. And I personally can speak to that because that's where my healing journey began. I had 3 spinal injuries. You could look at an MRI. The science was there to say I should live a life of chronic pain. And I wasn't willing to settle that diagnosis was going to own me, because as I started to study pain, just as you said, there's a pain loop. And the pain loop is that the neurons that are firing together wire together, and then the body's just sending these pain signals, even though the pain may not actually be there. We get in, people with chronic pain can get into a pain loop, which is really, really hard to break. But what I love about neuroplasticity and the power of the placebo is that we now know that we can shift through not just thinking it, because I think there's a misunderstanding that if we just say it, there's a difference when you say it versus you embody it. You truly believe it. You can say it, but if you don't believe it, the body cannot come online until it truly steps into that level of intention and faith and a higher power, if you will. There's a surrender that you can heal. And I love what you said about that, because the science is now validating. And if you get out of a victim consciousness, your body can release the hormones that it needs to heal you. And that's a big part of one of the things that I do in my practice, is to help people bring on the body's mechanisms for healing. And I love that just through the power of intention and power of belief, sometimes the placebos work stronger than the pharmaceutical drugs. And that's a conundrum, right? For the pharmaceutical industry, when you have a placebo that can be more powerful than the actual drug itself.
It's also really interesting too, is the fact that people can even take and know that they're taking a placebo and it's still going to work, which is very fascinating. It's counterintuitive, but that actually works that way. Your body is seeing that, you're feeling that, and I guess embodying that, and then that's what's happening.
Yeah, I was wanting to bring on the summit. I don't think I'll secure her for, but she wrote this book called Healing Ourselves. And one of the premises of the book and the things that she brought forth within that book is one, the power of the placebo, but the other was the intention when somebody comes in to say a healing session, whether it be with a physical therapist or a chiropractor, it could be an Ayurvedic practitioner, but the thought that when they come in, there's the placebo, but it's also the intention. So coming in and saying like, my intention around this healing is X, Y, or Z, and setting that intention. And then it was also just the ceremony of the practice itself. So whether it be, whatever steps, like whether it be checking somebody in to them filling out a form, asking them questions, to, laying of the hands on somebody, like all the things that kind of surround that experience of healing, creating an environment of healing is also as powerful as the placebo and the intention, like ceremony, intention, placebo, all of those things coming together, creating almost like a ritualist practice that you're going to heal, can be way more powerful than actually something that is external that really doesn't allow your body to come online for that practice.
Yeah. And I think as I listen to you talk about that, I think that's one of the reasons why I think intentional journaling can work so well too, is because you are creating this ritual of doing things through, whether it's the affirmations that then help, motivate you more positive. You're more apt to continue to follow through with the things you're trying to create in your life, because you've already set this intention. I am going to do this to help create the life that I want. And so then you have all these other tools within it, your visualization, your affirmations, your positivity, and all that together. It becomes like that practice that you're saying, it's something you're doing daily with the intention there for this end result.
Precisely. And I think that having something tangible, because like we talked about at the beginning of this, is that you could think it could be conceptual in your head, but there's this tangible element that is part of that ritual or part of that practice that creates, like you said, a ceremony. Like you have to have a place to put your journal. You have to have a pen that you use. You have to create a space where you're going to sit down, whether it be the morning, whether it be an evening, all creating that intention around an activity or a mindset or thought or an affirmation to move you forward. So yeah, I guess what I'd like you to speak about now is how has this changed your life? Like, obviously we're talking about how this is for everybody else, but, you said that, you were bringing all the best of the things that you had experienced, right? So, yeah, like how has even just creating the journals and bringing this into the world changed your life? I'm just curious.
Sure. Well, it definitely has put me one step closer, and I love my life right now. I really do. I mean, it's so rewarding for me to get to do something that I know is impacting people in a positive way. That is so fulfilling. But even on, like, when I first started creating the journal, I at that time had used journals, and I had used like planners and that type of thing. And I wasn't really good, honestly, about being consistent with them. So I think I don't know whether my attention span was short with it. I'd get bored or whatever. So I intentionally wanted to create something that I could easily come back to again and again and again, as well as the people using it would do, which I have found that I have done that. And in the process of doing that, I too continue to learn more about myself and continually just make minor changes and little small changes in my life, particularly with my routines. I'm just a lot more in tune with myself to know what's working and what's not. So just from a standpoint of, even as each season shifts, my way of getting my physical activity and my body movement and that type of thing tends to shift in terms of what works for me, in terms of like the times of day and how I do that. And so just looking at that on a regular basis and seeing like, okay, what worked well this week? Well, what's one tiny little change I can make so that I will actually follow through on these things that I want to do. So I know that I follow through a lot more on doing the things that I want to do, from a, like, I guess, success in what I'm trying to create in my life. But then I think also, it's allowed me to relax and appreciate life more. So to settle into, and I guess gradually have more and more gratitude and more joy simply for everything that I have today. Not that I'm not looking forward to things that I want to create in the future, but just a lot more peace, calm, and joy on a day-to-day basis. And it can be like just tiny little things that can help to create that. Knowing that for me, a daily walk, because, well, in my journal, I have like the 3 prompts that most people tell me on again and again have been the most impactful for them, are the ones that I do at the end of the day. And that's how I celebrate me, what brought me joy, and beauty that I noticed. And by doing those prompts at the end of each day, I started to notice things like my daily walk outside is really important for me. That's what brings me joy every day. And I hadn't recognized that until I actually put it down on paper. And so knowing that now, and knowing how important and how much joy it brings me, I work to make sure that I structure my days in a way that I can get that in there. And then other simple things too, just, and recognizing that lighting that little candle during my journaling practice like sets the tone, makes me happy. So tiny little things that I appreciate, understanding how much I appreciate them, and then incorporating them more into my life has helped me be more intentional with how I create my days, and brought me more joy, I think, in the process.
You said something that just like pulled so heavily on my heartstrings, like I almost brought tears to my eyes. But you said, and the reason it did is because it came from me doing your journaling practice. But you said that one of the things that your journal does is it prompts you and asks you how you celebrate yourself or your wins. And before that, doing your journal, like I started noticing again, it was like that critical thinking skill. I was like, oh, like I would look at a day and I'm like, well, I didn't have a big win today, or because I think, again, like my belief system was a win or something celebratory had to be something really big. And when I did your journal and I said, and it's like, how did you celebrate or see a win? I would sit there for like a long time, because one of the things about myself that I've worked with for years is my level of perfectionism. And when you're working from a level of perfectionism, sometimes things for yourself aren't good enough until like you have this idea that it's like a big win, or you took it versus like little tiny wins, like that a little tiny win could be that you got your child to laugh, like a big roaring laugh could be a win. But again, it's part of that gratitude piece. And it warmed my heart so deeply, because like sitting with that question, I almost want to cry. Like, we don't celebrate ourselves enough, or at least myself. Like, I think that I'm really hard on myself. I can be perfectionistic. I can be looking externally for those bigger wins. But the journal had me sit with like those, like you said, a win could just be going on a walk and enjoying that moment in time. It doesn't have to be, I think what it's hitting me right now is that we think that things have to always be around success. It's this, our culture drives us to think that wins have to be a big success, versus some of the biggest wins we can have in our life could be just the memory of your child laughing or holding your partner's hand on a walk. That could be a big win. And so, yeah, that just like totally pulled on my heartstrings, because I think that's the power of journaling. Like you said, that there are these ahas that you can have that you wouldn't necessarily have otherwise.
Yeah, I think you really do start to notice the patterns that happen in your life. So yeah, like I think like speaking of the walk, I mean, I always knew like I'd take a walk and it would, I'd be, oh, yeah, that walk was great. Why don't I do this more often? Or I take a hike and I'm like, oh, I should do this more often. I love this. But when I sit back and I look at the patterns of the things that bring me joy, because I took the intentional time to look at them, I start to like, oh yeah, these are the tiny little things in my life that are regular things that by just adding more of these tiny moments, I mean, these tiny moments are what make up our days, right? So adding more tiny moments of joy to your day can have a really huge impact on how happy you are on a daily basis, I think.
It can have a compounding effect for sure.
Yeah.
So, so now you don't just have the journal, you also have a digital course, The Secret to Creating Affirmations That Work. Could you give us your, why you created that digital course to complement the journal?
Sure. I think, it goes back to what you were saying before, that in order to make the change, you have to believe the affirmation. Well, I think sometimes if you are not and haven't been trained or have the practice of working with your belief system, I think that's easier said than done, honestly. So I think there are a number of things, or I know there are a number of things that you can do to help you shift your beliefs, to shift the level of how strongly you believe something. I think that's something that we take for granted, that maybe you either believe something or you don't. But truly, there are certain levels of intensity of that belief. And when you're creating something like an affirmation, you want to bring that level of intensity up to where I think you had said you fully embody it, you fully believe it. And that can be something that's done with conscious effort. And there are other things that you can do to help complement allowing your affirmations to work more strongly for you too, like pairing them with power stances, or different ways of utilizing them on a daily basis that you might not have thought about before. So as an example, I shared that I like to do my walk every day. Well, as part of my walk, I incorporate my affirmations into my walk time. And oftentimes I'll be like power kind of feeling, hands up in the air, really truly feeling the emotions of that affirmations while I'm out taking a walk. So there are a number of things that you can do that take your affirmations from simply saying something to actually allowing them, getting yourself to truly believe them, truly put them into a process of different things that you can do on a regular basis to help them become a part of a routine that then, particularly for these longer term affirmations where you're working on shifting reality in some way, whether it's like it can be things like, you want a promotion at work or something like that. It doesn't have to be just the mood. It can be physical things that you want in your life. And by truly believing in the possibilities and taking the steps that are necessary to allow yourself to fully embody those beliefs, that's going to really help your affirmations work. And what I found is that a lot of people either don't know how to do that, or secondly, when they're trying to write their own affirmations, because like I said, you can find lots of the ones, particularly with your mood, on the internet. But when you're trying to write the things that you want to create in your life, it's also important the way that you structure them. So just simple things like you want them to be stated in a positive form, or you want them to be stated as something that's happening right now, not in the future, because you don't want this thing to always be in your future that you're creating.
Yes,
so it's
I
really
love that.
important to think about, this is what's happening right now in my life. So little tips like that are what I share in that course to help people really get the results that they want from using them.
I love that you said, because I feel like, and I see this in my practice, where people have a goal of where they want to go, but they're here. And to get here, right, they haven't gone through the steps or gone through the motions to get here yet. And so one of the things about Ayurveda is that sometimes the gentle, slow changes are the most sustainable, versus like say somebody goes into the new year and they want to go on a diet and they want to lose 25 pounds, then 6 months later, the 25 pounds comes back and they wonder, why didn't they sustain that weight loss? Like, it's just kind of a classic example. But the reason I use that as a classic example is because they didn't go through that long, slow, incremental process of where they embodied and they implemented those tiny shifts so that they wouldn't revert back to the way they are. And one of the reasons, my practice in Ayurveda is it's loving and compassionate, and it may be slow, but it's like slow and steady may be what wins the race versus something that's really radical. And what you said is, it's like the words, if the words like out of reach are so far or not integrated yet, our words can be very powerful, but also sometimes they can be unbelievable.
Right.
The words that we're saying are not believed yet because we haven't stepped into that version of ourselves yet.
And that's really important. Yeah. Especially like
Yeah.
when you're doing the affirmations, I think that's the first thing that happens for most people. You say an affirmation, and the first thing that happens is your mind comes up with all the doubts and reasons why that's not true. And so you have to get beyond those. And one way of getting beyond that is really saying it and then feeling for and listening for, okay, what are those doubts? And then step back and say, okay, what can I do today to help me get past these? And maybe it's just a step in the right direction. It doesn't have to be, everything doesn't happen today, but if you can get yourself to where you believe you have a pathway to that future, then I think that can be really powerful to keep you going and make that affirmation work. And I think your example, particularly with weight loss, is a perfect example too, because I think that's one that a lot of people use for affirmations for wanting that. But I think it's really important not to dwell on the weight loss, which is more of the negative aspect, but to dwell on the beautiful, strong, healthy individual that you want to be. And that's going to put your mind as, how do I continue on this path towards this wellness and this beauty and strong, physical vibrancy that I want.
Precisely. I love that. I love that. And that's really where I try to help my clients get to this place of, when they embody a practice, they get to see all of the spillover. And I mean that in a positive, like, oh my gosh, I didn't know my mind was going to be more turned on. I was going to have more energy to play with my kids. I was going to sleep better. And, and all of a sudden I'm showing up at work and I'm not missing days, or, it's like, there's a goal that may be what they think they want, but what they really want is to embody what that experience is like. So I think we'll end here because there's so much more we could get into. I want to give you an opportunity to let people know where they can find the journal, and yeah, would you let people know how they can find you, how they can find the journal?
Sure. The journal is the JMB Living Journal. So you can find my websites, jmbliving.com. And I have the journals there, but there's also all kinds of like free tools that you can download there as well to help in your wellness practice, and check that out. I'm very active on Instagram. I have a YouTube channel, again, just JMB Living. You can find me on, either of those, on Facebook, or just email me at julie@jmbliving.com. Would love to connect with anyone that, is interested more in this type of thing.
And you have graciously offered, it's such a huge offer. I invite everyone to take full opportunity of this. Julie has offered for one season of the journal in a PDF format for free. So you can opt in during this day of the summit to have access to an electronic version of the journal so you can get started in your experience. That is such an amazing gift. And I'm so excited that you're offering that to our listeners today. Thank you so much for all of your time and for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
Yes, thank you. All right.